So they say that deaths of celebrities comes in threes. And as Popperation, the pop culture surgeons that Eric and I say that we are, I feel it would be remiss if we did not touch on the fact that in the last couple of weeks, we've lost 3 individuals who have had a major impact on our society and even our pop culture. They are, of course, Aretha Franklin, playwrights Neil Simon, and Senator John McCain. Whatever your politics, whatever style of music you like, whether you like live theater or television or movies, these 3 people affected American art and pop culture. And here at Popperation, we would like to express our sympathies to the families of those 3 and suggest that maybe, especially for Neil Simon and Aretha Franklin, their art is still out there. Go take a look at it. Go listen to it, because they made a difference, and we're going to miss them.
Attention, attention. Pop surgeons Eric and Stacey, please report to Operating Room 1. Pop surgeons Eric and Stacey, please report to Operating Room 1. Surgery is about to begin.
This is Popperation. I'm Stacey.
I'm Eric, and we are joined today by my friend Ally. Hi, Ally.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
So today we're talking about a thing. It's a book. It became a movie in 1990. Now it's a television show. And beyond being a piece of popular entertainment, I think it's safe to say this has become a cultural phenomenon. One of my favorite signs from the protest that took place in London recently was an illustration of Donald Trump with a red cloak on and a big white bonnet, and the caption was "of Putin." And everybody who watches The Handmaid's Tale totally got that reference. A lot of times I see marches where women show up en masse with these red cloaks and these big white bonnets, and it's a look, and it basically says, women do not want to be oppressed because the international symbol for female oppression now seems to be the handmaid.
Well, it was made that. I mean, that's exactly right. And I think it took on a life of its own. It was a streaming new take on a book. And, there was a movie back in the day that I saw. And the one reason, aside from her lovely presence, that we have Ally here is because I have not watched the Netflix streaming version.
It's Hulu. Let's not get sued.
Oh, was it Hulu?
Yeah.
6-1, right? But I haven't watched any streaming version. And the reason was because I did see that. What year was the 1990? I saw that, and I saw it at the time, and it was so disturbing that I don't want to go back there. And also a lot of times reality now in 2018 is so disturbing. I don't need to see something worse that frankly could happen, which is also why I'm not watching a lot of World War II movies or things about the fall of the Roman Empire. You get me?
Loud and clear. So we have Ally with us. Ally, among other things, is a Handmaid's Tale. I'll call her a super fan. So
but she
much
also
of a fan.
should tell us a little bit about herself.
Sure, yeah. But I met Ally because, I met Ally via Facebook. We were in the same industry for a long time. She invited me to her Handmaid's Tale Facebook group, which she set up, which I think is a brilliant idea for shows that have spoilers and stuff. So tell us about the group and tell us about yourself.
What's the point? What's the
Sure.
point?
I can tell you all of that. My name is Ally, obviously, and I am a Handmaid's Tale superfan. I would say that is an accurate portrayal. I'm big on Facebook. That's not in like a big in Japan sort of way, but I post a lot of things on Facebook, and I find that it's nice. It's a nice way to create community by creating these groups. I've started several different groups. I have, one for Good News Only that I started after the 2016 election.
Just a little asterisk. I wonder if that may, in the end, be Facebook's legacy once we get past, because we have gotten past a lot of let me take a picture of the meal I had. Remember when that was a big thing on Facebook? But these groups, these niches, if you will, and I'm wondering if that is, as it's going to evolve into that is where Facebook is, as you go to your group or groups.
Sure. I mean, I think sort of creates that online sense of community where you can talk about one topic incessantly and obsessively for an insane, for as long as you want.
And you chose
Handmaid's Tale. And I chose Handmaid's Tale, yes. As I was telling the group before, my favorite book growing up is The Stand by Stephen King. So you can sort of get an idea. I'm a very dystopian, a lover of dystopia. I like books and movies to be very dark, which is funny because I like to consider myself a pretty upbeat person in real life. So maybe that's my alter ego. But, I read The Handmaid's Tale a million years ago, as most of us have. And then, when the TV show was coming out, I actually haven't seen the movie, so I'm looking forward to that discussion. But when The Handmaid's Tale came out, the streaming show with Elizabeth Moss, I was so excited to see these characters sort of come to life because I had... When I read a book, I'm a big reader. When I read a book, I sort of have a picture in my mind of what people are going to look like and how they're going to interact. And what I think that this particular show has done is really been true to the story, been true to the original material, and everybody looks and interacts and acts almost the way that I had pictured it in my mind 15, 20 years ago.
Well, and I think that's part of my issue in that why I chose not to watch the streaming is that I knew it would go even further down that road than a 2-hour or hour and a half movie can do.
Yep.
It's also 2018, so we're able to see and talk about things that in 1990 they weren't willing to, and they weren't willing to go as dark as you possibly can, or as dark as the book was.
Although I'll tell you, having seen both, I was surprised the movie went there. Like, it went there.
I told you that it really traumatized the F out of me.
So for those who are living on another planet and don't know anything about The Handmaid's Tale, let's backtrack a little bit. This was a novel by Margaret Atwood, Canadian feminist in the mid-'80s, yeah? Like 85 or something?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Became a 1990 film written by Harold Pinter. And then a 2017, 2018, soon to be 19, I'm sure they've been greenlit for season 3, series on Hulu run by a guy named Bruce Miller. So as Ally referenced, it's a dystopian story that takes place in this fictional country called Gilead that is within the borders of what used to be the United States. The U.S. has been overthrown by this theo-fascistic society that takes all of its rules from the Old Testament. And the main thing about it is that, it really wants to explore the oppression of women in a society like this. Now, what's interesting about what Atwood did is that she didn't invent anything. This is not really sci-fi. She didn't create any new technologies or anything. The one thing that is a little futuristic is apparently environmental disasters, or probably the after effects of this war, are such that only about 10% of women have working reproductive systems. And so what happens in this society is that women have been kind of put into these groups. And we'll talk about the characters in the piece in a little bit. So we'll get into some of these distinctions. But there are handmaids who basically exist to procreate for the rich and powerful. There are wives. There are Marthas, who are basically servants. In the book, they mention these Econo wives, which basically are wives of poor people, but they couldn't, they can still reproduce.
They can reproduce, but they're they're not a lesser stature than handmaids. And I think what's interesting is that to be a handmaid, I believe that you had to have a child to prove that you were fertile in the old regime. I'm pretty sure that that's how they pick the handmaids, or that's how they know the handmaids. Yeah. But the Econo wives maybe have a tiny bit more freedom, and they are married versus the handmaids, which are...
Yeah. So women cannot read, work, or vote, or own property or anything. I mean, they are literally just the property of men. And procreation right now in this society is everything. They're so worried about not having another generation to pass on to that they've created some of these structures. Not really plot heavy. I mean, there is a plot to this thing. And just to note, the plot of the book is mirrored very much by the 1990 movie, and is mirrored by season 1 of this streaming story. The first season ends pretty much where the book ends. And then season 2, once they decided to go with season 2, with Margaret Atwood's blessing and participation, actually, they just kind of continued the story. So really, though, this is about all the ways that women are oppressed in this particular society. And as Stacey said, it gets pretty dark.
It's very difficult. It's very hard to watch. For me, it's very hard to watch. And In 2018, it's even more difficult to watch. And I guess, again, that's the point. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I get it. But it's even more difficult because it's not, again, and I think that's the beauty of what Atwood did, is it's not science fiction. It's not happening on another planet. It's not even happening 20 years in the future. It could happen tomorrow. And that is, and again, you don't know something's evolving and changing like that until after it's happened. Most of the time you're not aware of it. Yeah. And that's the scariness.
Well, you're not alone, Stacey. I have had a lot of friends who were very into season 1 when season 2 started, and season 2 is even darker and more bleak than season 1, if you can imagine that. They stopped watching. I had friends who watched the first couple of episodes and they said, this hits too close to home. They couldn't do it anymore. So I think that, it's hard to sometimes, especially in 2018, to separate sort of the fiction from the reality.
I think there are compartmentalization skills. And I can go to a certain point. Mm-hmm. Others can go to other points. Everybody's different in what they can. But I agree. I'm with where your friends are. And in fact, season 1, I knew what it was going to be. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here in 2017, and we're fighting to not go down that road. And I just couldn't do it. Yeah. But again, then you look, but when you go to just let's compartmentalize, as I was talking about, and go to performances and the actual art of it, it's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And what makes it even scarier, I think, is that not only did Margaret Atwood not, create any new technologies or anything, she only used oppression techniques, if you will. That's a horrible phrase.
No, it's true.
That happened elsewhere in the world before. So this is all historically based on something that happened. Apparently, there have been oppressive societies in the past that have had handmaids.
Did you just say apparently?
Well, I mean, I've never heard of another,
oppressive?
No, handmaids. I've never heard that that's like really a thing, that women are just kind of, I mean, people have had concubines. But it just, the idea of this ceremony, I mean, the whole thing is just so over the top creepy. I will just say, and maybe I'm naive, I was surprised to learn that every single device that is used to oppress these women in this show is actually based on history.
But I think that to me is what makes it scarier than any bloody thing in the world. I know that there's probably not going to be any starships that come bebopping to us and blowing us up. Yeah. Probably not Star Wars, but I can see that rights are taken away. I can see that people are being processed, using that word, to go into certain boxes and that sort of thing. That to me is much scarier because it's fucking happening. And that again goes to why I didn't really, I was like, I'm not going to say much on this podcast. And I feel like I've said a little bit more than I thought I was going to because I haven't seen the show. But I do know that the actor, what they did is they did a quality job.
Yep.
They did a quality job.
And you have seen the film. So we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to go through the characters of this piece. Like I said, there is a plot line, but it kind of twists and turns. And it's not really like this arc that kind of, total beginning, middle, and an end. But it really, the main character of this whole thing is a woman that in the book is only known as Offred.
So we don't know her quote unquote real name.
Yeah. Now, in the book, there was this moment where, and it's actually in both the film and the television series, where in Handmaid's training, which is awful, all the women are whispering to each other their former names, their real names. And June was a name that was whispered in the book, and she was the only name that wasn't accounted for later in the story. And so there became this, among the readers, they said, I bet she's June. I bet that's her real name. And Margaret Atwood has said, I never intended that to be the case, but I don't mind that people are kind of assuming these things. It means they're really into the story. In the movie, her name is Kate. For some reason, they just gave her another name, and that's fine. I think when you dramatize this, you kind of have to, if you're going to have any scenes where she's her former self. Anyway, Elizabeth Moss plays Offred in the TV series. Natasha Richardson, who did a wonderful job.
Oh my God, she was wonderful.
R.I.P.
Played. Yes.
Sadly,
the
sadly,
late great Natasha Richardson.
She was wonderful, and it was where she was an up and comer at the time. This was one of those steps to going.
to getting, to becoming a star and that kind of thing. And she was really, really showing her chops.
Yeah. The commander, who is probably, the chief kind of bad guy in this, a.k.a. Fred Waterford. Fred is such a stupid name. The only reason his name is Fred is so that her name could be Offred, because of Fred is basically how she is referred to. And Offred is also kind of a pun on the idea of being offered as a sacrifice kind of a thing. So Margaret Atwood was into that. Joseph Fiennes plays the commander in the show. So weird that I thought he was so hot in Shakespeare in Love, and now he is just the creepiest of the creepy.
He was hot in Shakespeare in Love. You weren't wrong.
That's an indisputable fact.
Yes. Okay. But now I look at Joseph Fiennes, even off. It's kind of like what happened to me when I watched Fatal Attraction, and for a year I see a picture of Glenn Close. I'm like, she's fucking crazy, right?
Or his brother was Voldemort, and I sort of can't look at Ray Fiennes.
It's hard.
The same way,
in a sexy sort of way anymore.
Yeah. Well, at least he has the nose. That kind of brings you back to reality. Robert Duvall played the commander in the movie. And what was interesting about that is that was a little closer to the book, I think, is that the commander and his wife were a little older. They made them younger in the show, and it works. They both work, but it's definitely a different choice.
Yeah, this is the way to have children, the thing. But it was, when there is the sex scene with Faye Dunaway, that freaked me out.
Yeah. And we will talk about the ceremony in a moment. Faye Dunaway played Serena Joy Waterford, the commander's wife. A young actress by the name is Yvonne Strahovski, who I had never seen before.
Never in my life.
Show. She's fucking amazing. She
was the best thing about season 2.
Isn't she from Chuck?
I don't know.
The TV show Chuck.
I didn't see Chuck.
Yeah, she was the lead. Chuck was a TV show for
that makes it even more amazing that she was the lead in Chuck and is now Serena Joy.
Can I just say something about Serena Joy? When I read the book, they make a point that she's in the book a former televangelist, sort of like a Tammy Faye Baker. So I found it. I always pictured her as sort of an older woman. And before I watched the show, I think that was probably my biggest sticking point, was that she was going to be this younger woman. But as Eric sort of alluded to, what I like about making her younger is that there is some sort of power dynamic between her and Offred that wasn't in the book. That was, older woman, younger woman in the book, but to have two women who could have been friends in a former life, could have gone to brunch together, could have seen each other in the social circles, makes the new roles, I think, more poignant.
Very different tension. Yeah. A very different tension.
And Serena Joy's hunger for having a child is much more deeply felt, I think, in the television show. I felt like in the movie, Faye Dunaway wanted to have a child because that would give her power. But Serena in the TV show wants that, and also really wants to be a mother. What Serena Joy is kind of like, to me, she's the Ann Coulter of the show. It's kind of a reminder that when you're talking about the oppression of women, that includes really conservative women who might even be advocating for their own oppression. And we have to watch out for them too. It's just kind of like, it's a little wake up that Serena Joy's life is demonstrably worse since the fall of the United States and the construction of Gilead. And she probably didn't mean for so much to be taken away from her. And
especially because she was basically one of the constructors of the way that Gilead is. So it's sort of a double whammy.
Yeah, and season 2 of the show really gets into that. Moira is, in the book and in the TV show, is an old friend of Offred. In the movie, she's someone she meets at Handmaids training. But nonetheless, Moira becomes a handmaid because she's a lesbian. So I don't think Moira had ever had a kid before.
No, I think that's
I actually probably think they just test them to see if they're still menstruating, honestly. Just about the whole fertility thing. Anyway, Moira, and she has a great a line in the book. It's like, she says, I'm a gender traitor. I like girls. And Kate Offred says they could have sent you to the colonies for that. And she goes, not if your ovaries are still jumping, because they're so desperate for kids. Aunt Lydia is the chief trainer of the Handmaids, and for whatever reason in the show, she just sticks around and is a thorn in everyone's side for a long time. Good, because Ann Dowd is fucking amazing in this role. Victoria Tennant played the role in the movie. Different kind of crazy, different kind of evil.
Yeah, you talk about somebody, she was pretty amazing. That was also, she was kind of going up at that time as well.
Yeah.
Was Victoria Tennant.
Mm-hmm. Nick is the driver with whom Offred has an affair that's actually orchestrated by Serena Joy. Serena wants her to get pregnant that badly. She's like, my husband might be shooting blanks, so here, why don't you go screw the driver? I know Ally's got a special place in her heart for Max Minghella.
Oh, he's really special. He's super hot. He's not the greatest actor in the world, but I'm willing to overlook that just to see his beautiful face.
But I will tell you, in the movie, Aidan Quinn gives him a run for his money. 1990 era Aidan Quinn
he's beautiful. He's beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's a great actor. He was at the top of his game.
Yeah. And then finally, a character that appears in both is another handmaid who goes by the name of Glenn. Her master's name apparently is Glenn. Alexis Bledel from the Gilmore Girls plays Emily in this one. And I had a hint that she could go dark because she was in Sin City and she was really good in that too. But she goes places that is a Gilmore Girls fan would be shocked.
So I'm not a Gilmore Girls fan. I tried it. It wasn't for me. But I remember her on Mad Men. She did a turn on Mad Men. And
really?
Yeah. She was a guest star on Mad Men. That's how she met Vincent Kartheiser, who's now her husband.
Okay.
And she plays a depressed housewife. #Mad Men. And she was excellent. And I was still a little skeptical about her casting, but she also, unbelievable, blows it out of the water.
Yeah, and especially the places she's allowed to go in season 2 once she was kind of freed from that original storyline. Amazing. Blanche Baker is an actress who played Offglen in the movie. Best known, and I had to look this up because I never would have recognized her, played the older sister in 16 Candles. So again, range, people, range. And probably someone, there's so many talented people out there that we'll never know their names. I mean, people who are just amazing, who could be the next Meryl, and we'll just never know. So that's kind of the breakdown of the characters. We're going to talk about the ways in which they all interact in just a moment. We're going to take a short break and then continue our discussion of The Handmaid's Tale with special guest star, Ally Jenkins.
Special.
We are talking about The Handmaid's Tale, my favorite streaming going on right now. Oh, I'm lying, of course. I'm not watching it. But we're here with Ally. Thank you so much for coming in and being a female voice on talking about this.
My pleasure.
It is huge. It is. I don't know. I hesitate to call it a fad because I don't know that it's a fad. Because I think it's changing. It's changed a lot of how we. I mean, the streaming obviously changed things, but this particular, there's a lot of political stuff happening, and I think it's changing the way people are making art.
Yeah, and let's be real. This is politically touchy at a point in our personal political history right now in 2018 in a way that it might not have been before. When they were creating this streaming series for the first time, I think everyone on set while they were filming totally thought Hillary Clinton would be president and probably thought, what an interesting thing as we have our first female president. Let's take a look at how it could have. And then things happen the way they happened. And now it's really fucking scary.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Had that election gone a different way, maybe I would have been able to watch it.
It's quite possible.
I'm just going to throw that out.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is interesting because this season, I don't believe that this is a spoiler, there is an episode that deals with mothers and children separating, and it aired during the week when people were being separated at the borders, and it was obviously not planned because, these storylines are done months and months and months in advance, but a lot of people were talking about sort of the parallels between like real life and this fictionalized.
But when people are dehumanized to that extent, it's like the worst thing in the world that any parent could ever possibly imagine. If the government did the worst thing in the world they could possibly ever do to me, it would be to rip my child away from me. And so it's kind of not an accident that we have a government that now completely dehumanizes people who are crossing over into our border. And that's exactly what they're doing.
You have to dehumanize or you can't do it.
Yeah.
You have to dehumanize. Yeah. And so that's why you see how it works. But again, in this story, that's exactly what they were doing with the women.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of people, I think, who would be oppressed in a society like this. Margaret Atwood clearly wanted to focus on the ways that this would impact women. The book goes a little bit more into other things like, the way race is treated. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. As a gay person, I will say, the gender traitors that we've seen the way that lesbians are treated in this. But also, especially in season 2, there was a flashback. One of Emily Offglen, Alexis Bledell's former colleague, she was a professor at a college, was a gay man who was found hanging at the university. I mean, so it's like, gender traitor apparently goes both ways in this society. But women are Margaret Atwood's focus, and therefore the focus of both the movie and the show.
Well, and I think, too, I'm a Jewish woman, and, that's not really touched on in the series. And we talked about this in our Facebook group. But in the book, all of the Jews are deported or killed. And, so it's interesting to watch this, to know that I would, much like people are in real life every day, sort of doubly oppressed for my religion and for my sex. So, they don't really touch on sort of religion other than the fact that, everybody is very overtly Christian in Gilead. But I think that's something interesting and probably will be, I would hope, focused on down the line. Yeah.
What's really horrifying in the book is that, they're all invited back to Israel, the Jews, and then like halfway across the ocean, they just literally capsized the boat and just killed them all. Because they could, and that's just, yeah. But let's talk about some of the ways in which this theme is explored. We made oblique reference to the ceremony before. The ceremony is something that happens every month in a Gilead household that has a handmaid, and that is when the handmaid is believed to be ovulating. There is this ceremony that takes place where she puts her head in the lap of the wife. The wife and the handmaid grab hands while the handmaid is basically raped by the commander. And even if she's not necessarily physically fighting back, she's certainly not giving anything that remotely looks like consent to this in this particular society. And it is, something that does not get easier to watch. No matter how many episodes you've seen and no matter how many times they show this to you, it's brutal.
It is brutal. And I read this when I was fairly young, so I hadn't really envisioned what it would look like aesthetically. And so the first time that I saw it on the TV show, and I saw that the way that the handmaid's arms are behind her, which is also a very submissive position, and the wife is holding on, so it's sort of seamlessly one woman. It shocked me to my core, and I'm not a very shockable person, but you're right, and it doesn't get any easier.
That was the scene in the movie that really traumatized me more than anything else, is seeing Miranda in between Faye's legs while she's holding Natasha.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's one of those Richardsons. But they're all British. They're all good. Does it matter, people? Don't tweet me. But in between Faye Dunaway's legs, and she had the black veil over her face, so that the face that, in theory, Robert Duvall was seeing it's disturbing on about 50 levels.
Yeah. And I would actually say it's more disturbing in the movie than it is in the TV show, if that's even possible, just because it's Robert Duvall and Faye Dunaway done up as a televangelist. I mean, it's just, you can't sit,
the idea, it's one of those things. It's a Hollywood thing to say that, wouldn't it be great? I mean, it's okay if your rapist is good looking, but that's not usually how reality is. And so that's why, in some respects, and I get that Joseph Fiennes, it's like, no, he's good looking when he's not in this character, but in this character. But you understand what I'm saying, that Robert Duvall is never Robert Redford.
No.
And so when that scene,
two would ever get to
when that scene, you don't get to pick. Well, you think about Indecent Proposal, where where he sold, and it's like, well, sure, that okay, you sit there and go, yeah, I could probably do that for $1 million. But Robert Duvall, you might have to up the ante.
And also they're such good actors, and they were both doing their best to be as evil as they could possibly be, Robert and Faye. And so they were both, it was just, and it's not, it wasn't twice as disturbing. It's disturbing. It's just the whole look of it is just, it's brutal. And so that's like the main thing. that never goes away is that these handmaids are oppressed and dehumanized in that particular way all the time. In season 2, there was a particularly brutal one, Stacey, where they decided to force Offred to go through the ceremony, even though she was 8 months pregnant. And it's just like, we're going to do this to you anyway because we can, because you're stepping out of line. And it's time for you to be controlled again because it had been 8 months since this had happened.
Well, and also because they were framing it to either make themselves feel better or whatever, that it was going to help bring on the labor of the baby.
But that was
awful.
Really hard to watch. And yet we watch every week, don't we?
I mean, I keep saying that things are so awful, but, it's the first thing that I do when I come home on Wednesday nights.
Another thing that happens a lot, and this is in the show but not in the film, is, it's mentioned in the film and it's absolutely mentioned in the book, is losing eyes and fingers for the smallest transgressions. In fact, there's a main character of Warren. Her real name is Janine, and she's in both the film and the series. But in the series, makeup has gotten better, and it just was easier to do, I guess. She lost an eye. Why did they take her eye from her?
Because was it when she was having an affair with her commander?
I think so. Yeah, they found out that her commander was taking her out at night, which, of course, she had no control over. She's completely under this man's thumb, but, of course, it's her fault. So one of the things they did to make her less desirable so that she wouldn't be, she wouldn't lead men on in the same way is they took her eye out. And so the actress who plays this role spends every single scene with a prosthetic that, her eye is sewn shut. And if a woman is caught reading or is known to have read, she loses a finger for every transgression. They start with a pinky and they just kind of go on down.
Work their way down.
And so that's something else. But then there are more subtle things. When they went to Canada in season 2, one of the things that, because it came out of the blue and I was completely shocked by it. The commander and Serena Joy go on a diplomatic trip to Canada, by the way, the same week that Trump started something with Justin Trudeau. So the creepy prescience of the show, it cannot be overestimated. But they went to Canada, and the Canadians, who are, of course, even in the future, so nice, Canada, they decided to be really culturally competent as they treated these visitors from Gilead. So when they took her husband away to have these important meetings, they'd handed him a schedule. And of course, it's just a schedule so he could, figure out what was going. They were like, oh, we made one for you too. And it's a bunch of clock faces that show the time. And it's a bunch of pictograms that depict eating, meeting, all these other things, because women in Gilead are not allowed to read.
And I had forgotten, because there's lots of reading and, you don't remember all of the details, and it's in a show that has a lot of as a house of horrors, but you forget that they're not supposed to be able to read. And I saw that too. And it totally took me back that, even these women who are sort of quote unquote the first generation of Gilead who do know how to read, that people in the future, and you are introduced later in the season to a character who pretty much grew up in Gilead, do not know how to read, and that they are not allowed to read. It blows my mind, especially as somebody who reads a book a week. I can't. That would be unbelievable.
And it kind of reminded me of the ways in which we try to be culturally competent to sometimes cultures who are more oppressive than our own. And it's a delicate. I didn't blame the Canadians at all.
No.
But, but the look on her face was just sad. This is an intelligent woman who helped create this whole society. And now this is what she's reduced to is, here, look at these pictures that can tell you when to eat, and just keep an eye on that big hand. And when it's at the top of the clock, then you're allowed to have some food. The child separation that you noticed in season 2, episode 10, the week that the country was completely embroiled in that whole mess at the U.S.-Mexican border, which, by the way, by the time this episode airs, I hope the kids have been reunited. They're not at the time that we're doing this, and maybe not. But the show really kind of brought that to a head. They had a reunion of Offred and her daughter that was just joyous enough to make it, you rip your heart out when the guards came along and just took this girl away. And both the daughter and the mother were beside themselves with grief.
And I find it interesting. I'm not a mother, but you can feel just the confusion, and you see the confusion in the young girl's face. She doesn't really know what's going on. She just knows that her mom is not around, and it breaks your heart in a million different pieces.
But I also think you are a daughter.
True.
And I think that and it's a matter of one human being being taken from another human being,
who's their
duress.
family member.
Yeah.
I think that everyone can relate to something, even if you sit there, well, I didn't like my family, so I'm all good with that. You may have a pet, You know, it's that same
Sure.
thing.
Best friend.
And I think that, but again, it goes back to the dehumanizing. So they don't have the same feelings as we do.
Well, and it was also it was another form of abuse because this mother and daughter had been separated from the very beginning. And to keep her, again, under his thumb, the commander says, I have a present for you. We're going to give you a reunion with your daughter. And then they do it just for a half an hour, just so at the end of this whole thing, we can rip them apart again it was that the reunion was only there to make her suffer at the end of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't there to make her feel good or to give her any kind of gift worth having.
It wasn't a benevolent, we're going to reunite you with your daughter. We're going to make it as painful as possible.
It's
Absolutely.
about power.
It's all about
100%.
power. And rape is about power. Rape is not about lust. All of this is about keeping people. The final kind of, tool of oppression I wanted to talk about, there's a character in season 2 who does not appear in the book or the movie, beyond that particular plot line, is Eden. Let's talk about Eden.
Eden. I have conflicting feelings about Eden.
You're supposed to, I think.
I think so. It's interesting. I read a lot of recaps after the show just because I like to see different people's perspective on the episodes that we watch, and I talk about it a lot. One of the things I read was that, we sort of had, when Eden is introduced as an Akana wife for Nick, the driver, who still carries on a sort of love affair with, as much as people can love in Gilead, with Offred, you think that she's going to be inherently evil. A lot of the things that I read about her is that she's 15. Okay, so she's getting married off of 15. And she has probably grown up in Gilead her whole life, or a large percentage of her life. And it's interesting to see, sort of the brainwashing that goes on versus somebody like an Offred or a Moira who, had most of their life in pre-Gilead Boston. She comes into town and you think inherently that she's going to be a snitch. You think she's going to be evil. But in the end, she's just a teenager who didn't choose this life, and it was sort of thrust upon her, and, tries to choose love in the end. And
yeah, she's married off to this man who doesn't want her. And she truly, I think, honestly believes that she loves him at first sight because she's supposed to. She's a product of this culture.
Correct.
And then when there's another guard
she's
out there.
She's also 15.
She's 15.
15.
But she's one of those, I get bratty, I guess, is the way that she's framed. She lectures people for not being holy enough a lot. I mean, you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time in this particular 15-year-old's company.
But understand that that's the nature of adolescence.
Sure, but that's where the show really goes, because she meets a guard who is kind to her, who does like her for who wants to have conversations with her. And when he says, let's go away, she's like, I can't. And a chance encounter with Offred in the kitchen as Offred looks at her and says, in this world, honey, take love wherever you can find it. That's my advice to you. So she takes off with this guard, and she's gone for maybe, a half an episode.
Yeah, 24 hours, 48 hours maybe.
And they find her, and as soon as they bring her back to Gilead, she's put to death. And the scene is beautiful and heartbreaking. That's the thing about this show, is that they are willing, they're able to do things with cinematography and with framing of photos.
It's gorgeous.
They're gorgeous and completely just wrong and oppressive. And it's that kind of the dichotomy of appreciating something with your eye while your heart is being ripped to a million pieces is just one of the things I think is so genius about this show. But, at the end of the day, you are reminded at the very end when you're looking at her about to, and she can renounce him at any point and save her life, and she doesn't. You're like, don't get in the way of a 15-year-old who's in love, right? I mean, it's just like she's 15, and you see the terror in her eyes, and all the stuff about her that you didn't like before just melts away. And it was one of those things that the show really kind of, jostled you in terms of how you felt about her. But ultimately, she's just another victim of the society.
Is that how does it help you understand Joan of Arc a little better?
Joan of Arc was a badass, but yes.
But she was young.
Yeah.
And that was my point.
So before we take a break, I do want to kind of mention one other piece about this show that I think is, if the one thing that I fault the television show in comparing it to either the book or the film, is the way that it treats race. One of the things that I've heard a lot of is that people of color look at this show and say, okay, yes, women are being oppressed right and left, but they treat race like it's just no biggie. And would these people not also be completely racist? And I think they probably would. And I just think that's an interesting thing about in 2017, you have a question. It's like, do we treat race the way it's really going to be treated, or do we have a diverse cast so we're not accused of being racist by having an all-white cast? Because this story would have nothing but white people in it if it were real. Well,
I think you then also go back to when it was being planned, and we're talking about, again, I think the idea was that we were going to have a different president than we have right now. And so the conscience of America would be different than what it is right now.
Yeah, and
so
Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter, preceded the 2016 election.
I understand that. I'm just saying that you're making a piece of art that you feel like it's going to be good. Maybe you'll get a couple of Emmys, but you don't see the social significance of it, because I don't know whether it would have had the social significance it has had the election gone a different way.
It might not have. Although I will say the book's never been out of print since 1985. I mean, even when times are good, people are like, they're into this story and they want to read it and they want to experience it.
Yeah, more as a cautionary tale than something that we're actually living.
Yeah. And now we're getting closer and closer to it. And so it's even more and more cautionary. On the one hand, I'm really happy we get Samira Wiley as Moira, because she's
just the best.
I've said fucking amazing like 20 times already, but like so much about this show is so great. And she is fantastic. And after they killed her off unjustly in Orange is the New Black, I was like, when are we going to see her again? And then bing, she popped up in this thing. I was like, oh, good. Because she does bring, and she's got everything that Moira has from the book. She totally serves it up. Elizabeth McGovern was fantastic in the movie, not to take anything away from her. But I'm glad that we have this more diverse cast. Also, her husband and daughter are Black and mixed race, respectively, in this new show. And I do I see both sides of it. Because in the movie, they actually, when she's watching TV at one point, they make reference to the fact that the last of the children of Ham have been removed to the colonies. And you see this truckload of Black people just being shipped away from the society. And that's real. And so that's like, that would happen in a society like this. That would absolutely happen. I doubt that a white couple would rejoice at getting offered a Black handmaid to offer them up a mixed race child. I just think that these assholes would not stand for that.
I agree with you 100%. I don't think that's realistic. But at the same time, that's where your TV IQ kind of comes in, where you're like, okay, what are we going to do though? We want everybody to watch it.
Yeah,
for sure.
So we're going to take another quick break and then get into the main question of why we're here. Why the hell do Ally and I even watch this show?
It's a good one.
Okay, so I believe I've told you why I don't watch the streaming version. Mm-hmm. It's because I did watch the movie in 1990, and it scarred me for life. So I guess the question is why. I mean, we know a little bit about why Ally is, but seriously, why? Why is it? Why are you watching it? Seriously, why?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Sure. I think that I can only partially answer that question, because I think some of it is just because I enjoy the storytelling, and I am able, you had mentioned this earlier, I am able to compartmentalize, I think, better than a lot of people, because I do recognize that a lot of it is fiction, not as fiction as I would prefer it, but I see it as sort of a piece of art, and there's been a lot of art over history that has been either hard to watch or hard to depict or hard to look at or hard to read about. And I think that is just as important, being knowledgeable about that, being aware about that, being woke, if you will. It's what the kids say about those sorts of things is just as important as taking a break and not being able to look at it. It just, for me, to use another example, on 9/11, it happened. I spent the next 18 hours in front of a television because I just wanted to know what was going to happen, what people were saying. And I've always been like that. I've always wanted to sort of, some people might say that that's nosy, which is also true, but I've always wanted to just be in the know. And I think that that's a little bit of a part of it.
I totally get that, because I was, I think most of the country was in front of, 9/11. It was that thing you couldn't look away from, even though you wanted it to be, unreal.
Correct.
So much. And I do want to put a little asterisk on mine. I am not watching it. I am not watching it because it's not good. It's not good art even. It's not a good story. I think it's good that it was made, because I think that this generation needs to see it. And nobody was going back and either watching the movie or, I haven't, in schools, they're not reading the book necessarily. So
I think they are, actually. I think
my daughters have. Yeah. I mean, they're in high school, and I think
it's a college probably aged kind of thing. But yeah, but a lot of
But anyway, but I do think it's good. But again, I saw it, so I do know the story and all of that. But I just want to put an asterisk that it's not because of the quality or even the message. Because I think the message is important. But anyway, Eric.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Sorry. To that point, I think that much like Offred says in the series in the show, you got to choose love. I think that in this time we have to choose what we can handle and what we can't. And especially in this day and age, we have to sort of have that self-care. And I think that that's just as important as not watching the show. Whatever's going to be right for you and whatever's going to make you feel good in this tumultuous time is what's important.
And as we've said on this show a gajillion times, there is so much TV right now. Like, pick and choose. Like, watch what you want. Absolutely. I think I watch it because it is a cautionary tale, and I think that we all need to be cautioned about this, me included. I mean, I consider myself to be pretty woke as far as that goes, but it's good for me to kind of, and again, I learned some stuff about like what's happened throughout history by saying, oh my gosh, everything in this show has indeed happened before. I also think that, sometimes I want to watch things to escape, and sometimes I want to, and this sounds so like, such triggered snowflake bullshit, but I want to be seen. I want a reflection of what I'm actually thinking and going through, so I know that I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. And I think that this show does that for me as well. And I think the third part of it for me is that while you do have to get through all the stuff that's about the oppression, which is what we've talked about mostly here, quite frankly, I also find it inspiring as hell, because these women are fighting back. Every single episode, they are doing something, even if it's smuggling a letter to try to hand it to somebody else to get it over the border. The season 2 finale, which, by the way, we're about to spoil the hell out of.
Spoiler alert.
There's this amazing underground railroad scene where from Martha to Martha to Martha, and I'm assuming it's so they all don't know the real story, so if any of them are caught, they can't divulge anything.
Probably.
They've created this underground railroad to help handmaids escape. And watching that whole, it was like an action movie, and it was fucking amazing. And so it was, there we go again. There's a subtitle for the show, #fucking amazing. But I do find it inspiring. It kind of gets me up to #resist another day in this. And so I think that you have to take the good with the bad, but the good is good enough right now. And I need a little bit of that inspiration these days to kind of remind myself I don't want to go there. We might only be 2 steps away, but those are 2 big steps, and I don't want to take them. And it gets me out there and makes me think, how can I fight the power in this moment right now, the way that these women are doing so incredibly bravely, and it is inspiring to me.
Okay, so do we want to do a big moment here where we say spoilers coming up, and if you haven't seen the end, you need to turn it off?
Could, fast forward us about, 15 minutes, and we're just going to take us to the end of the show. Turn it off now. Go watch season 2, the end of the show. Big spoilers coming, because we do want to talk about the finale. Now, the finale happened more than a month ago. So if you haven't seen it by now, you have some catching up to do anyway. But I do have a friend who, like me, usually watches one show at a time, and so he wanted to wait for the entire thing to drop, and then he can just go watch. I don't know if I could watch 3 episodes of The Handmaid's Tale in one evening.
No way.
It's not really a good binge for me. But let's talk about the finale of season 2. So shit really hits the fan. And I think the pictograms were so smart, like 3 episodes before, because what happens in season 2 is that Serena Joy decides that after she has a child at this point, Offred has given birth to a daughter, which of course Serena Joy looks at as her daughter, not anyone else's.
Correct.
She realizes how painful life is going to be in this society for her daughter, and she realizes she's never going to be allowed to read anything. And so she petitions the government to allow girls to be taught scripture so that they can grow up to be holier women. And in the midst of her, protest, she takes out a Bible and reads to the governing body.
And what's interesting about that scene is that she comes in with sort of her army of wives, and there's probably 20 wives in their signature turquoise. And the second she takes out that Bible and the second she opens it up and starts to read, all of the wives that she was with, in solidarity, push right back and leave the room.
They start peeling off immediately, like, I can't handle this. This is too much even for me. And these are women who, they can all read. I mean, these are all, they all existed pre-Gilead.
Correct.
But they're so bought in. So she comes home from this hearing without a pinky, escorted by her husband, and she's lost a finger because she read in front of the council, and the council voted unanimously that she needs to be punished for this. At the same time, the Martha of the household, whose name is Rita, which is confusing, but okay, she has arranged for Offred/June to escape with her child. So that's the Underground Railroad scene I was just talking about. On the way out of the house, Serena Joy catches them. And what was so amazing about this, I did not see this coming, was June Offred just looks at Serena Joy and says, you know how hard life is going to be for this girl? I can get her out of here. Let me save your daughter. And Serena Joy gives a tearful goodbye to this infant, hands her back to the handmaid so she can be, set free, one presumes, in Canada.
I will confess that I had to sort of fast forward through that scene because it was so heartbreaking to me. I knew where it was going. I could see where it was going. And you don't want to feel any sympathy for this woman, Serena Joy, who orchestrated Gilead and is, oppresses Offred in her own right. But you do by the performance and the separation of mother and daughter and mother, and it was very effective.
She's been doing this all season. The minute you think you can trust Serena Joy, then she just snaps back into her power mode and does something so cruel and awful, and then she's a human being again. And it's just, again, she's Ann Coulter, right? She is this horrible, horrible woman who is making it worse for everybody, but then is also oppressed by the same forces that she's created. And so if we're going to free everyone, she's one of the people we also have to free.
It's so layered. It's magnificent.
So at the last moment, right, June is about to get on a truck with her child. What she does is she hands her child to the other handmaid who is escaping, Alexis Bledel, Offglen, Emily, and says, call her Nicole, which is interesting because that's not the name she gave her daughter. It's the name that Serena Joy gave her daughter, which is like, what's going on? Tell her that I love her. And she closes the truck door, and there's this look on her face like she is about ready to burn this whole town to the ground. And she's going to stay. She made a conscious choice not to escape to Canada with her infant daughter, but to stay in Gilead. And people had feelings about this. What were your feelings?
I still am having a hard time deciding how I feel about that decision. The selfish part of me wants Offred to escape and to be reunited with her husband and her friends and, build the resistance from the outside. But obviously she is going to be much more effective building the resistance from the inside. And it was interesting because the final shot is sort of almost like a V for Vendetta scene. She's got her hood up and she's got this, fuck the world look in her eyes. And I love that, but I understand also that it's probably not much of a story if she escapes, and there's a lot more richness and layers and nuance that, to stay in Gilead, but you just like, oh, this is the third time she's tried to escape, so I guess third time's a charm.
I have a quick question with regard to this. Again, don't watch it. But so after she read the Bible, I'm guessing they voted not to let the children read the Bible.
That was never a consideration.
No, that was never going to happen. But Serena Joy was, again, she, I think, got in touch with the power that she had before the U.S. fell and Gilead was erected. And she just thought she could do this and thought by her pure, charisma could get away with this. But it was a real turning point for her. And I mentioned it as part of this whole sequence because it is what allowed her to say goodbye to her child. The fact that she had just lost, a part of her hand because she did something that if her child ever tried to do would be punished in the exact same way. So she realizes now, and I'm wondering, so season 3, I'm almost kind of hoping that that this was a real changing point for her, and she might even be part of the resistance going forward. That might be hoping a little bit too much, because again, Serena always pulls the rug out from under you. As soon as you think you can trust her, it all goes away, and she's very complicated. But someone described the season 2 finale to me that this episode was like a superhero origin story, and I was like, yeah. Okay. I think that what had happened, first of all, let's not forget, Offred still has a daughter behind enemy lines. Her 5-year-old is still living in Gilead, and probably she wants her to get out before she escapes without her. Even though she tried to do that before, but now she just saw her. She's top of mind. But also, I think what's going on with her is that freedom fighter has now eclipsed every other identity she has. And I think she's willing to die at this point. I think you're correct.
I think that's right.
She is mother, child, sister, friend. All of those things have gone away. She is now a part of the resistance, and that is what she is. And if she has to die to burn this whole fucking place to the ground, she'll do it. And that's kind of, and I'm getting totally subjective. I'm getting this all from a look on Elizabeth Moss's face as she looks at the camera, but she's not sad. She's not scared. She's angry. She's nothing but pure anger and rage. And it'll be interesting to see where season 3 goes. And I hope she doesn't go back to the Waterfords. I hope she's able to be kind of an underground, I don't know where she's going to go, but I hope she's able to find some space where she can actually be kind of a full-time resistor. I think that could be interesting.
Did you like the ending? What did you think about it?
It was shocking. I was surprised. And at first I was like, get in the car. Like, what are you doing?
Right?
But I do see that it makes season 3 possible. It makes season 3 more interesting. And I thought that it was just about all those things that led up to it. And especially when she handed her child over, she had given this child the name Holly after her own mother. Serena Joy had named the child Nicole. And when she hands her child to this other handmaid to raise for the foreseeable future, the instructions she gives her: call her Nicole, tell her that I love her. Which I'm reading a whole lot into that, but that wasn't an accident. I think that we're supposed to kind of look at that and go, that was an odd choice. What is going on? And I think she feels an odd kind of kinship now with Serena Joy, that, it's just because she just watched her give up her daughter as well. Not her biological daughter, but someone that she clearly regarded as her own child.
I would agree with that.
Before we get to our final diagnosis, Ally brought up something before we started recording that I thought was so interesting. And that is just, yes, this is a piece of entertainment. Mm-hmm. We can call it that. Although we've talked about how difficult it is sometimes. But it is something that, for whatever reason, it doesn't follow the same rules as other pieces of entertainment. Where other pieces of entertainment can create merchandise around them, people have tried with this, and it doesn't work. So let's have a quick conversation about Handmaid's Tale merch.
You mean like their wine?
Yeah. So this wine company,
oh my gosh,
came out with 2 reds and a white. The reds were called Offred, Offglen, and the white was a Chardonnay called the Serena Joy. And the labels featured these kind of silhouettes that hinted at these costumes.
I've seen them.
And ew, how could you be at a dinner party and serve somebody Offglen Merlot?
Now, this is not stuff that you keep to serve people. This is a gift. This is what you gift somebody.
Who?
Either as a gag gift or it's a fun. I'm serious. It's like all of those weird labeled wines that they have out there that you just, that you take.
To me, the only thing it was good for is I put the story on my Facebook wall, and my little comment was pairs well with misogyny and oppression. What else could you say about? What would you serve with Offred Cabernet Sauvignon?
Again, you don't fucking drink it because I bet it tastes like swill.
Yeah.
But there were some other kinds of merch too, right?
I have a shirt to, full disclosure. I have a shirt with a phrase in Latin that is very popular in the show. A friend bought it for me and I was very excited to wear it, and I do wear it out. And I get less comments than I thought I would. So people are either they don't want to engage with me while I'm wearing it, or they don't know what it means.
But that's a resistance rallying cry. So that to me is like that's kind of what I was talking about before about the show being inspiring. That particular Latin phrase, I don't remember the Latin.
Nullite te bastardes conerundum. I took Spanish, not Latin in high school.
Which means don't let the bastards grind you down.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's, and it's a note that the handmaids pass to one another, which means I'm part of the resistance. Are you? And so that to me, in this day and age, it's actually perfectly appropriate, and I wouldn't look down at anybody for wearing that shirt.
Well, that's good because I love it.
I do know there's this t-shirt company called Swish Embassy that sells t-shirts particularly for the LGBT community, and they have a like comic book rendering of really hot guys in Handmaids costumes. I don't know what it's supposed to mean, but the tagline is "Under his eye." You can just imagine. You can just imagine. That's one I'm looking at. Not going to buy that one.
Right.
I do buy. The t-shirt I'm wearing, as a matter of fact, is from Swish Embassy. A lovely rendering of Saint Judy Garland, but that one probably not. But yeah, it's just there is this weird thing about merch that's happening right now with The Handmaid's Tale that's just, the wine just killed me.
Yeah.
Well, I think the idea is that, and this is for any show, is that you try to make as much as you can while it lasts.
Although I don't think the show is putting out this stuff.
No, but the show is on and the show is popular. So I have this wine. Let's see. And then what happens once A, it stops selling, or B, the show's no longer relevant, they'll just change the label.
Sure.
I mean, that's what that is. But we're in America. We're in a capitalist society. Merchandising for literally everything is going to happen.
The fact that this wine exists means we're not yet in Gilead, so I guess that's good.
It's true. That could put a positive spin on that.
Well,
silver lining the hell out of that
Right, and
shit.
the fact that your T-shirt actually has words on it that you're expected to read means that...
Also true. We're not to pictograms yet.
What would the pictogram be like for "Don't let the bastards grind you down"?
I think it'd just be a middle finger.
Probably. One can just imagine. And yet you won't find many handmaids wearing that under their robes either. So final diagnosis about The Handmaid's Tale. Stacey, you pretty much got the movie to go off of, but you have a pretty good sense of what The Handmaid's Tale is all about.
Well, the story itself, I think that my final diagnosis is, and it's just easy, I think everyone either read the book, see the movie, watch the streaming. That's what you need to do. I think everyone should be exposed to this story. As Ally referred to, at one point we called it a cautionary tale. Now it's almost a documentary. But I think that everyone should be exposed. There are certain stories out there in literature, cinema, theater, whatever, that everyone should be exposed to. And I believe this is one of them.
And I think that, for those who are listening to us and are on the squeamish side and thinking there's no way in the world I could watch any of this, do read the book. The book is, as most things, without the visuals, it's a little bit easier to kind of get into it. And all those elements of resisting when the handmaids are starting to communicate with each other in a way that how can we at least be a force for good to overthrow this place is a good one. For me, I just kind of go back to why do I watch this show? As depressing and as difficult as it can be, I do find it inspiring. I just, the moments that I live for are the ones where somebody kind of breaks through. There was a series of letters written by the Jezebels. We didn't even talk about the Jezebels, but the Jezebels are basically the prostitutes of this world. They wrote a bunch of letters detailing their experiences in Gilead, and through some, miracle of activism and people working together, they were able to smuggle those letters into Canada. And now in the world of the show, they've all been published, and the outside world knows just how bad it is, at least for a segment of this population. And those moments when I saw the letters finally get through and then being published yes, I was just so yay. I was so, and so there are moments like that as well. And I think that people who are watching the show who have a mind to resist what's going on, even right now, can sometimes use a little bit of that oomph. Ally, you got the last word. Final diagnosis on The Handmaid's Tale.
My final diagnosis, to what both Eric and Stacey had said, I agree that everybody should read it. Go buy a copy. Use your local library. And I think, yes, it is a very important piece of, resistance, pista resistance. And I also think it's just important to watch as part of our society, as part of our community, and as a pop culture moment in time. This is what 2018 is, and these are the kinds of shows that are being made. And I think that's important to remember why. I think it's important to remember why we don't want to stand for that. And I think it just sort of sums up where we are in the world in an entertainment sort of way.
And you exactly succinctly said, we've talked about this before, Eric and I, that the idea is that popular culture, it's the art is life and life is art kind of idea about it, is that why are these being made, these shows being made? Why are people watching them? Why are they popular? You got to think about that. And it's pop culture, but there's a reason. And I think it's fun to go behind what the reason is, because I do think that there's, in this case, specifically an important reason for that. So
we're going to move on to slightly cheerier fare when you come across us next week. So we hope that you'll join us then. Before we close out for today, I just want to say thank you so much, Ally, for coming by and talking with us today.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had such a good time.
Open invitation.
I will be back anytime. I'm never shy of sharing my opinions.
Awesome.
But thank you so much.
So this is Pop-Oration. I am Eric.
I'm Stacey.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Pop-Oration with Eric and Stacey, the podcast that dissects popular culture one bloody organ at a time. Subscribe today on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other podcast listening site or app. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Pop-Oration Room. Check out our website at popoperationroom.com for all of the podcasts, our blog, swag, and games. Until next time, when we're back in the scrubs.